Welcome to AMM 2450, part 3 of the psychological perspective on consumerism. So last time we left off, we were talking about routine, limited, and extensive involvement when it comes to consumer involvement. So the example I gave you, if there's an item that you buy routinely, we're assuming the involvement is short. You don't spend a lot of time deciding. The cost tends to be very low cost, so short. Information search, really not needed. It's very internal only, and number of alternatives usually go with what you typically buy. So you tend to be loyal to certain brands or whatever's most readily available. So buying socks, basic socks, your basics of items, paper towels, for example. Limited, it's when you're expecting low to moderate involvement. The time could be short or moderate, does depend on what the item is, but the cost is low to moderate, and it's mostly internal information search, but we're looking at a few alternatives. And this is if you're, I don't know, for example, you're looking for a textbook and you're trying to get a better price because it can get expensive. It's textbook. So you'll look at a couple of places. Maybe you'll compare renting versus owning. That would fall under limited. And extensive would be high involvement, long time, high cost. So internal and external, many alternatives. And this is high ticket items like cars and, something, let's say for a wedding, for your own wedding, things like that, where it's like you're not planning on buying this that often, and you want to make sure you make the right decision. If it's an appliance you've never purchased before, that would be high involvement. So looking at the purchase decision, the act by the consumer to buy the most preferred product. Two factors intercede between purchase intentions and the actual decision, and that's the attitude of others. And looking also at unexpected situational factors. So what gets you to, act, gets you to buy. So those are things to look at. Post-purchase behavior. That post-purchase dissonance is common, and that's the important. Is the customer, as a consumer, are you happy with your purchase or not? And as a business, is your customer happy or not with their purchase decision? So questions to ask: did I make the right decision? Did I buy the right product? Did I get a good value? And again, I mentioned in class, but people that are happy, they give positive word of mouth, and people that are unhappy, on average, studies show that, you share with about, on average, 11 other people a negative experience. And I think that can add up exponentially when you throw in, social media into the mix, where people complain, are either happy or complain about a product, and they post it for everyone to see. So you have to think about that. Things from a business perspective that you have to think about is effective communication, so that you can get feedback. It's really important. And that you can communicate to the customer expectations so they're realistic, so you lower the chance of post-purchase dissonance whenever possible or needed or available. Follow-up sales calls, guarantees that you can put in, warranties, and avoid the under-promising, and over-deliver. You want to make sure that the expectations, if all of a sudden you're getting too much, you can arouse suspicion. And if the customer feels shortchanged, that's not good either. So you want to make sure that you communicate clearly to that customer base so that their expectations are realistic, and what you expect is what you get. Now, if it exceeds expectations a little bit, that's great. When it goes too much and you're like, wait a minute, what's going on? It can arouse suspicion, so you have to be careful with that. A big part of this is cognitive dissonance theory. This is to make sure that you understand it's this discomfort. This, basically, a good word is regret. But it's discomfort caused by inconsistencies among your belief, attitude, and action. So the amount of inconsistency and happiness and regret that's involved in this, it does vary. It's not, always equal amounts. But the idea is that you want to avoid or reduce dissonance, obviously. As a consumer, you don't want to experience that. As a business, you don't want your customer to experience that. So the idea is that you want to avoid or reduce it, and we do that by changing beliefs, attitudes, and that you're aiming to restore consistency. So the idea is to reduce it. We change behavior, belief, Maybe we add a belief. Actually, this is true versus what you originally thought. And sometimes we ignore conflict, as a consumer. Sometimes as a person, you do. You're like, I shouldn't get this. This was not a good idea, but you ignore it. That does happen sometimes. So, you got to, contend with that. But the idea is that naturally speaking, we tend to want to avoid that. So it depends on the situation that we're talking about. But like the example here, it's like I smoke cigarettes and smoking is unhealthy. Now I don't smoke, but I'm just using this as an example because this one's a big one. So a person smokes, right? And they know smoking is unhealthy. It's not good. So there's different ways they can do it. They can either change their behavior to contend with that and actually stop smoking, right? They can change their belief. It's not that bad. My dad smoked until he was 95, add a belief. Yeah, smoking is bad, but, I exercise, I eat my vegetables, I'm good. And ignore the conflict. You know what? I don't care. I'm fine. It doesn't matter. So those are examples of how you can reduce the dissonance, on your own. So understanding your customer, how they do that is very helpful as a business. So post-purchase dissonance, again, the probability of post-purchase dissonance and the magnitude is a function of the following. So the degree of commitment, how important the decision was to the choice that they made, the difficulty that was experienced in choosing the alternatives. And also another thing that that you have to factor in, and again, it's case by case basis, is that individual's tendency to experience like anxiety, right? And like remorse, buyer's remorse. So there's a couple of situations where, if you splurge and you spend hundreds of dollars that you wouldn't normally, you might have some buyer's remorse, but there are some people that no matter how practical and frugal their purchases are, they still have that they tend to be anxious and stressed out all the time. So you have to factor that in as well. So don't ignore that because that does matter. So to reduce dissonance, the following, anxiety, doubts, we want to reduce that. So want to make the product more desirable, that people really want it. So when you get it, less chance of having that dissonance. Decrease the desirability of rejected alternatives. So that's the idea. It's making your product look better than your competitors, make the competitors' products seem not as good, decrease the importance of the decision making, almost make it seem like, well, of course you naturally would want my product. Why wouldn't you? Reverse the purchase decision so you can see the steps and involved in deciding so that you can correct anything of the above. And another thing that you can do as a person is live with your choice and make a future note. But again, a negative experience is going to affect information that you're going to share. So you want to make sure as a consumer, you want the least amount of dissonance, and same thing as a business. You want your customer to be happy, because if not, then, they're not, you're going to have very little brand loyalty. Now, innovation matters. You have to know where your customer lies or where you are as a consumer. Some people are innovators and they buy the stuff early. So you have to get your product early into the market. And early adopters, this is where the products are more expensive. They make it in least amount of quantities. And this is the chasm, and this is the break, because then it hits the mainstream market. So people that want to be ahead of the curve, they're trendsetters and they want to be different. As soon as other people take on that trend, whether it's that phone or that laptop or that car, whatever, they've moved on. They don't want it because everyone else has it. So everyone else is wearing that type of bomber leather jacket, or they moved on to something else. So that's why this chasm exists, because people that are here, they're willing to pay more. People that are here are not willing to pay more. So, and they are not quite known as risk takers. Okay, so that's something for you to see. So this is so you can understand a breakdown, trends of early adopters. They're highly educated, very literate. They seem to exhibit a great amount of intelligence, achievement, aspirations. And as you can see, for innovators, they tend to be cosmopolitan. They love to network. Low risk aversion, the risk takers, they have a lot of courage. Early adopters are more localized, opinion leaders, role models, respected. Early majorities, high interaction, non-leaders, linkers, deliberate. Late majority, economic necessity, social or peer pressure, skeptical, and laggards, past-oriented, way behind, suspicious of change. These are typical descriptions of people that fall on this trend curve. So just so you know, in terms of innovation, you do use innovation, obviously, to spark interest and keep people interested in your product and your brand. And companies use the diffusion of innovation theory to evaluate how long it will take a new product to be adopted for at least half of the population, right? So, for example, the first iPhone came out in 2007, cost about $600. 2 months later, Apple lowered the price to $400, and in 2009, the price fell again to $200, and the phone offered twice the storage. So these are things that they do because, again, to expand to a greater amount of the population. So consumer emotions, just know, research reveals that consumers' emotional response to an ad is far greater influence on their reported intent to buy a product than it does the ad's content. So positive emotions toward a brand have far greater influence on a consumer loyalty than trust and other judgments. So that's why you want that's what PR, public relations, and advertising is all about. They want a positive outlook. So mentioned this in class, but again, shopping values, it also matters as a consumer if you tend to be utilitarian or hedonic. So utilitarian, and we tend to lean one way or the other. You can experience both, but you tend to lean one way or the other. And utilitarian, you're more practical. You actually tend to shop for need and function, things you actually need. Hedonic is more for fun, for entertainment and satisfaction. And I'm not here to say one's better than the other, and then if you do only one or the other, usually we tend to participate in a little bit of both, but some people tend to be more utilitarian, and others tend to be hedonic. So it just depends on where you lie. And some people kind of lie in the middle. That's what I explain in class. You know, there's a you don't have to necessarily be one or the other. We tend to see couples be one and the other couple partner be the other. Just know in terms of values, it just depends, again, on where you're leaning towards. Because if you're more need and function, you look at the attributes and that they actually satisfy that need. If you're more into fun and entertainment, the idea is that you enjoyed the shopping trip, and that it's not necessarily out of need or that you had to. It wasn't out of necessity. It was more out of just desire. It's fun. You feel excitement. Yeah, it's an entertainment venture for you. And some people hate shopping. They just hate it. They hate it. They hate it. So you understand hedonic is adventure shopping. You know, it's like when people go to those people that like to shop at TJ Maxx and Ross, and it's like a treasure hunt, right? And when they find the good bargain and it's not bad quality and it fits and they can afford it and they like it, it's like Christmas for them. So they love it and they stay current, and it's an experience. Utilitarian, some people, they just, again, you tend to be like more, I go in, I shop, I get what I need, I leave. They're just more practical. So just so you know, hedonic is more emotional, utilitarian is more practical, more rational. You're thinking things through. Just a review of conspicuous consumption, because sometimes hedonic shoppers, they're looking at outward signs. They're trying to showcase wealth and they're trying to impress people. So then again, that's going into conspicuous consumption. So a utilitarian shopper doesn't fall under the conspicuous consumer, whereas a hedonic shopper can. Not by default, just saying it can. So someone who's more practical, you get the refrigerator vacuum cleaner. It's an absolute necessity, and you get the one that gets the stuff done. But some people will get, the model that's like showcases and it's extra fancier and it has a lot more money, and you don't necessarily need all the bells and whistles, but you want to show off. It's just realized that today, especially here in the US, we have, in Western culture, we just have so much choices. I explain, going to the oral care aisle at the store, just soaps, detergents, fabric softener. I mean, everything, just for laundry products. We have tons of choices, that other people don't have access to. So that's going to, affect how you're going to, pick your choices, because you have so many to pick from. When you don't have a lot, then you're kind of, you're kind of stuck. Like there's not really a choice to be made. That's either you can afford it or not, and that you have the one thing to get. But when you have lots of choices, then again, how that advertisement is geared towards you and how you're responding, and how, again, if you're more practical versus you're more hedonic, that's going to determine, how many choices you're going to look at, and how you're going to respond. Okay. So please make sure our next lecture will be on the economic section, and we'll break it off into a couple parts there. So thank you so much for listening. Have a good one.